Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the live stream service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, Indiana. My name is Ruth Ogden Halstead. We are in a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both of which can be found online. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. Our service leader today is John Halstead. Our part-time interim minister is Patrick Price. On those Sundays when our pastor is not in the pulpit, we invite members or guests to share a special message with us. This is one such Sunday. We are very fortunate to hear today from Reverend Michael Dowd, who John will introduce later, and you might have already been introduced to him in the earlier hour if you were here. During responsible social distancing, we are striving to maintain the authenticity of our services. So we want to draw your attention to several parts of our service today. The bell you heard ringing was our actual church bell, which was recorded by Bob Allen. The chalice, which you will see being lit today, is our actual chalice in front of a green screen of our chapel, which has been possible by James Johnson. The music you hear is recorded each week by our music director, Jeremy Jacobsen. And if you are willing and able, we invite you to leave your cameras on so that your fellow congregants can see you just as we would if we were physically present together. You will be muted during the service. However, there will be a time when you will be unmuted briefly to say good morning to one another. We are currently streaming on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. Our service is recorded and will be made available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Thanks to all of the people who have made today's virtual service possible, including all of you who are joining us virtually. Before we begin our service, we will hear a testimonial from 2 longtime members, Tina and Brian Porter.
Good morning, I'm Brian Porter.
And I'm Tina Porter.
And we're here this morning to talk to you about what First Unitarian Church of Hobart means to us, how important it's been to us as individuals, as a husband and wife, and as a family. Our 3 daughters grew up in the church. We started going there in 1998 when Tina was pregnant with our youngest daughter, Lydia, who is now graduated from Indiana University, or will be graduating next weekend. We want to talk to you about why we commit to the church as much as we have financially. And we've done it many different ways over the years by trying to increase our pledge as much as we can every year, to doing fundraising. I've run a chili cook-off before, was host to a group dinner, fundraising dinner a couple years. We've participated in auctions, helped out with the rummage sale, and the church's financial stability is very important to both of us, as is ministry.
Can I add something?
You go right ahead.
I just want to add that we also have been active leaders in the church. Brian served on the board for many years. I served as worship chair, co-chair, and now serving as the chair of the search team. And so we've always been involved both financially and in the ways that we do the work of the church.
Thank you, Tina and Brian. Please take a deep breath and join us in a spirit of reverence as we listen to our prelude. thank you to Jeremy Jacobsen for that. Please join us now as we light our chalice. The words are printed on your screen. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Our opening words today are by Adri Kusero. It's a poem which she's written entitled Mary Oliver for Corona Times, Thoughts After the Poem Wild Geese. If you're familiar with Mary Oliver's poem Wild Geese, then you will recognize many of the elements here. The photos which accompany this poem were taken by Joe Heaston, so we appreciate that from him. You do not have to become totally zen. You do not have to use this isolation to make your marriage better, your body slimmer, your children more creative. You do not have to maximize its benefits by using this time to work even more, or write the best-selling Corona diaries, or preach the gospel of Zoom. You only have to let the soft animal of your body unlearn everything capitalism has taught you. That you are nothing if not productive, that consumption equals happiness, that the most important unit is the single self, that you are at your best when you resemble an efficient machine. Tell me about your fictions, the ones you've been sold, the ones you sheepishly sell others, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world as we know it is crumbling. Meanwhile, the virus is moving over the hills, suburbs, cities, farms, and trailer parks. Meanwhile, the news barks at you, harsh and addicting, until the push of the remote leaves a dead quiet behind, a loneliness that hums as the heart anchors. Meanwhile, a new paradigm is composing itself in our minds, could birth at any moment if we clear some space from the same tired hegemonies. Remember, you are allowed to be still as the white birch, stunned by what you see, uselessly shedding your coils of paper skins because it gives you something to do. Meanwhile, on top of everything else you are facing, do not let capitalism co-opt this moment, laying its whistles and train tracks across your weary heart. Even if your life looks nothing like the Sabbath, your stress boa constricting your chest, know that your antsy kids, your terror, your shifting moods, your need for a drink have every right to be here and are no less sacred than a yoga class. Whoever you are, no matter how broken, the world still has a place for you, calls to you over and over, announcing your place as legit, as forgiven, even if you fail and fail and fail again. Remind yourself over and over, all the swells and storms that run through your long, tired body all have their place here, now in this world. It is your birthright to be held deeply, warmly in the family of things, not one cell left in the cold. Please join our music director, Jeremy Jacobsen, in singing our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. You will all be muted, so feel free to sing loud and unself-consciously. For those of you who are familiar with the song from our hymnal, today there will be a new part, a line from Rumi's poem, which was part of the original song as it was written by Lynn Unger.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan now of despair. Come, 1,000 times. Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Please join us now as we recite our affirmation of faith. The words are printed on your screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Join us now. One second. Everyone will be, in just a moment, briefly unmuted so that we can say a collective good morning to each other.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. We miss you.
Hello.
Peace to y'all.
Everybody.
Nice to see you.
Hi.
Good morning. Good morning.
Bye.
Hi, Chad.
Janet. Thank you for everything.
Hi, Maggie.
I haven't seen
Hi,
this,
Dana.
Janet.
Hi.
Hi, Dana.
Hello. Good to see you.
Hi, everybody.
So good to see everybody.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody from the Allens.
Good
Morning, Bob and
Zeta.
Bob.
Bob.
I'm going to be taking you up on your offer to see your property when it's safe and prudent to do so, and it's okay with you.
Thank you all. Please join us now in our singing our doxology. The words are printed on your screen.
From all that dwell below the sky, then songs of hope and faith arise. Then peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land and every tongue.
Now is the time in the service when we take a moment to share joys and concerns which have arisen the previous week. Before we do that, I want to hold up a special concern for River, who is with us. River and his partner Nick have been ill, and they were tested for coronavirus, and it was negative, so it's not coronavirus. It turns out they have some mold growing in their apartment, which is making both of them ill. Nick had to go to the hospital for it, and apparently they have mold poisoning. So they are in need of a couple of things. First, they are in need of someone to foster. They have 3 cats, someone who can foster their cats for a period of time while their apartment is hopefully remediated by their landlord. And also they need some place to stay for a short period of time while this is happening. So if you are able to or know of someone who is able to help with either of these matters, please let myself know, or River, or a member of the board know, and so that we can help River out. Now, again, this is a time in the service when we take a moment to share joys and concerns which have arisen during the previous week. We believe that a joy shared is multiplied and a burden shared is lessened. So as the music plays, we invite you to type your joys and sorrows, your joys and concerns in the chat box. The chat box will not be made a part of the recording of this service, so you can feel free to share it as freely. Thank you. We hold up those joys and concerns which were shared, as well as those which were too close to the heart to be shared. Please join us now in singing our intermediate hymn, our hymn of meditation, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. And again, everyone will be muted, so feel free to belt it out like you're in the shower.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land. Faith is a quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reason why in our lives the answer show by how love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born and all shall die. Life's the time left in between. Follow a star to build a dream. Touch the earth, reach the sky, hug the laughter, feel the cry. May we see where we can give, for this is what it means to live. Touch the earth, reach the sky, soar with courage ever high. Spirits joining as we fly, to touch the earth, to reach the sky.
Thank you again to Jeremy Jacobsen for his wonderful music. It's my pleasure now to introduce our speaker, who is Reverend Michael Dowd. If you weren't present during the first hour presentation, which Michael gave, it was recorded and will be available on Facebook and YouTube. Reverend Michael Dowd is an eco-theologian whose work has been featured in numerous publications, including the New York Times, LA Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Newsweek, Discover, and on television. Michael's wife and partner, Connie Barlow, who is a science writer, an evolutionary educator, and fellow climate activist. Together, they have addressed nearly 3,000 groups throughout North America, including some 500 Unitarian Universalist churches, including our own First Unitarian Church of Hobart back in 2004 and 2014. Their work was featured on the cover of UU World twice, and they were honored as UU Religious Humanist of the Year. Michael's current project is called Post-Doom and can be found at postdoom.com. So with that, I welcome Michael.
First of all, I would just want to honor you, John, for your work. And I want to honor all of you for the challenging times that we are living in. And I want to speak briefly about coronavirus, climate change, and the myth of perpetual progress. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. I did that in the morning. But I really want to talk about three things that can allow us to be inspired in a local way in these difficult, challenging times. I want to speak about identity, history, and ministry. And by ministry, I mean where we can be a contribution as a collective, as congregations, as individuals, as families. Because, there's that old 12-step prayer, prayer, that serenity prayer. God, life, reality, let me accept the things that I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The reason that that's really an essence of sanity, sobriety, peace of mind and heart in challenging times is that to be accepting of what you can't change is to say it's to live in the space of, okay, here's what's real. Now, what's possible? And living out of that sense of possibility by accepting what's real. Those of you that were on the little thing we did prior to this, I use the word God and reality interchangeably, and by God I'm simply meaning reality with a personality, not a person outside reality. But accepting what's real, trusting what is, celebrating what's so, trusting reality, trusting the universe. These are all different ways of getting to that place of seeing what's real, what's out of our control, and then just accepting that as what it is, and then living from the place of possibility within that. So clearly, we're now dealing with something, this coronavirus, that is fundamentally changing the world. Now, the coronavirus didn't cause the current economic meltdown. It was a trigger, and there were many systemic, structural, unsustainable factors in every city-based civilization, and certainly in industrial civilization. And it was only a matter of time that something would trigger this kind of a meltdown, a depression. And so that's out of our control. But of course, what is in our control is caring for ourselves, connecting with others. And so the sense of identity, to know and remind yourself that you are not separate from life. You are not separate from Gaia. You are not separate from God, if you want to use mythic language. You are not separate from reality. You're a part of reality. You're an expression of reality. You're a unique expression of reality. And to live with that sense of identity that doesn't stop, not the skin-encapsulated ego, as Alan Watts regularly criticized, but that our larger body, our larger self, is life itself. Well, two quotes from Brian Swim, a physicist who co-authored with Thomas Berry the universe story. He says, 4 billion years ago, Earth was molten rock, and now it sings opera. Earth was once molten rock, and now it sings opera. We grow out of the dynamics of the planet in the same way that apples grow out of an apple tree. We are literally organically related. You can't be alienated. You can think, you can feel alienated if you forget that you are part of the body of life. If your thinking is not aligned with reality, you can feel alienated, but you can't be alienated. We all interrelate, interbeing. So that's one thing. Another quote that I love from Brian Swim, he says, you can take the whole universe story and sum it up in 2 sentences. You take a great cloud of hydrogen gas and you just leave it alone, and it becomes rose bushes, giraffes, and human beings. So that sense that we emerge out of this creative process, that however we speak about it, we're part of that, and our identity is part of that. The other thing about our identity is to recognize that you're mortal, and our species is mortal, and we're not going to last forever. We will absolutely go extinct at some point. It may be 1 million or 2 million years from now. It may be in the next 50 years. That's absolutely possible, because as the Arctic shrinks and less ice in the Arctic, more of that heat that was reflected off in the summer gets absorbed into the shallow, deep ocean. The Arctic Ocean is like, if you imagine a swimming pool, a large swimming pool, the deep part is like a hula hoop in the middle. The rest is shallow shelf. So as there's less ice, that gets absorbed, releasing more methane, and that's where things could wig out. It's a gift to be aware of that, because when we remind ourselves that, let me put it this way, if you're not aware that there's at least a 5% chance that you could die in the next year, that there's at least a 5% chance that somebody really close to you could die in the next year from coronavirus or from starvation or whatever, if you're not aware of that there's at least a 5% chance, your thinking is not aligned with reality. And so what this provides for us isn't just freak out. It's not just depression. It's like, okay, that's real. And there's probably at least a 25% chance that our species will go extinct in the next 30 years. So being with that, then we don't put off what's called completion conversations. And there are several ways that this moves into the sense of, well, let me say something about history, but this moves into ministry. History is that recognition that the universe story is our story. We're all part of this great story. So our history goes back before humans. It goes back to star. We are stardust, as I'm sure you all know. Our bodies are made of star stuff. The atoms of our bodies are literally forged. We're forged in super red giants and supernovas. So we're part of the body of life. So that sense of identity, of history that goes back through all of life, evolution is our sacred story. I want to really focus for the rest of this time on ministry. Where can we as individuals in this coronavirus time, in a time of abrupt climate change? See, a lot of people don't know that we're in an abrupt climate change regime. Abrupt climate change means 10,000 years of climate change in one human lifetime. That's how fast things are rapid. And it seems like all the evidence I've seen that abrupt climate change really began probably in the mid-1980s. So some things are already out of our control. If 7 billion people woke up tomorrow morning committed to doing the right thing, it's quite possible that it's already out of our control. So again, being with that, trusting reality is not to just fret about that or go get drunk. It's to basically say, okay, here's what's real. Now, what gives life meaning? Well, what has always given life meaning? Through all of history, and especially in declining times. As I shared in my earlier program, we have over 100 examples of previous contracting civilizations, and we know a lot about how people can have meaningful, joyful lives of fulfillment in times of collapse. And it's always looking outside yourself and finding another person or other people or other species that you can be a blessing to. When we look beyond ourselves and we look to how can we contribute, how can we make a difference in the lives of others. Now, it's challenging when we can't even touch each other, when we can't even hug each other, where I mean, there's so much starvation for touch, and that's understandable, but we can still do it. And I want to offer just a couple ways. One, one aspect of completion conversations, to write a list. I did this when I had cancer 10 years ago, and I looked at the possibility I could die in the next 8 months. I wrote a list of everybody that had been a blessing to me, everybody that had been a contribution to me, everybody that I could think of, that I could remember, that in some way had contributed to me. And then I made a project, and it took several months, to go through and personally communicate. I wrote letters, I did email, I picked up the phone. There were a couple people that I could visit, and I just communicated my gratitude. My second grade teacher, was still alive. I communicated gratitude. And when you communicate out of the blue, genuine appreciation and gratitude to the people who have been a blessing to you, you'll make their month. You won't just make their day. You won't just make their week. You will make their month. So being a blessing simply by communicating gratitude, you can do that without even seeing each other. So I encourage you to really have that kind of completion conversation. So that if somebody in your life dies, or when somebody in your life dies in the next year, most likely it'll be a when, not just an if, that you won't think to yourself, I never communicated. I never told them how grateful I was. So gratitude conversations. I could tell stories. I don't have time to do that, but of life-changing, tear-jerking, amazing experiences of people telling. I'll just tell one. I had shared this with a very curmudgeonly woman who was the business manager of the seminary I attended. And I told her about my writing a letter to my father, a 17-page letter, and how it was, he was moved to tears. I was moved to tears, and had this incredible thing. Well, I told her that. And then about 5 days later, I came into the seminary and she called me into her office. Michael, come here. I thought I'd done something wrong. And I said, what? She said, you know that story you told me about your father and you writing a letter of gratitude to him? I said, yeah. She said, well, I was really touched by that, and I was inspired. I just wrote a letter to my husband. We've been married 46 years. She said, I sent it to his work. I just talked to him. She said, I haven't heard him cry in 25 years. Thanks for sharing that story. So that's what I mean, communicating gratitude. The other thing is to communicate regret, to communicate sorrow. In the 12-step world, they call it making amends. but it doesn't have to be a big deal, but it just in some way to communicate. Write a list again of all the people that you've harmed, betrayed, had a negative influence on, just you did something inadvertently that it had a negative impact on or whatever. But any way that you can communicate. And it can often be just, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I know what a jerk I was, or what a shit I was, is the way I said it. There were two people that I had to say that. So communicating regret, communicating sorrow, communicating that you just want them to know that there was some negative fallout. There was something negative. When you do that, you will also make someone's week or month, because people don't expect that. I remember hearing years ago somebody, and this is why this is important, because we're in contraction. We're in contracting times. We're in, most likely, the beginning of a new Great Depression. And the people who you can count on, the people you can rely upon, the people who will be there for you and you'll be there for them, starts with blood family. And then it can span out. Congregations have a vital role to play in this community. But I remember a teacher said one time, he said, if you want magic to occur in any relationship where there used to be closeness, there used to be affinity, there used to be a bond, and now there's not. There was a falling out, it got stale, whatever. If you want magic to occur, do the opposite of what we normally instinctually do, which is what we normally do is we blame them for everything that didn't or doesn't work in the relationship. We take credit for everything that did or does work in the relationship. And of course, they're doing the same thing. So it's not a surprise that we're estranged. He said, do the opposite. You give them credit for everything that did or does work in the relationship. You take full responsibility for everything that didn't or doesn't work in the relationship, and shut up. I was taught that 22 years ago. I have never seen it fail. It's oftentimes, even if that person is still loaded for bear and has all kinds of ammo in their psychology about you, you will evaporate it. It evaporates when you take full responsibility for everything that didn't or doesn't work in the relationship. You give them credit for everything that did or doesn't work in the relationship, and just shut up. So these are ways of having completion conversations, of being complete, so that if somebody in your life dies, or you die in the next year or 2 or 3, you won't have that thought, oh, I never communicated my gratitude. I never told that person I was sorry, or whatever. So these are ways that you can be an enormous blessing to others. As I mentioned in the earlier program, hundreds, maybe thousands of species of plants and shrubs and trees will go extinct this century unless humans assist them in migrating faster than any other animal can move their seeds. So assisting plants in migrating north in this part of the world, south if you're in the southern hemisphere, is holy work. Building topsoil is holy work. Anything that you can do to be a blessing to life is holy work. So I think the last thing I want to say is, just as a congregation, these are difficult times. There's no easy answers. And if we can keep our hearts open with generosity, with compassion, and honor our grief, channel our anger, and then find ways of being a blessing to others, including having these kinds of completion conversations, we can have, each of us as individuals and our families can have meaningful, soul-nourishing days and weeks and months before we die, whether that's many years from now or whether that's soon. And so I just invite all of us to stay in that tender-hearted place and find ways to be a contribution. Amen.
Thank you so much, Michael. You do a wonderful job of bringing together the awareness of reality and also a positive, life-affirming, future-focused attitude and orientation. So thank you very much.
And any of different avenues into this compassionate, generous action in the midst of collapse, in the midst of contracting, painful, difficult times, go to postdoom.com and you'll see all of these conversations, including my conversation with John. Each one of them is profoundly soul nourishing in its own right.
Thank you very much. Please join us now. Now is the time in our service when we have time for making an offering to the church. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and in sacred space. And we give in the faith that together we have enough. The PayPal link is on the screen, but it is not clickable. So if you would like a clickable link, one is being posted now in the chat box, and you can follow that now while the music plays and make an offering to the church. Please join us now in singing the closing hymn, Spirit of Life. The words are printed on your screen, and again, you will be muted. So feel free to sing openly and freely.
Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots surely close, wings set me free, Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our closing words will be given by Reverend Michael Dowd.
May we may we leave this space, but may we leave this experience celebrating the best of what Unitarian Universalism is all about. Celebrating our differences, cherishing those differences, honoring life on life's terms, and then finding ways to be a blessing to everyone we communicate with. Amen, aho, and blessed be.
Thank you, Michael. Our postlude will be played by Joe Heaston, a rendition of Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell.
Paradise, put up a parking lot. The pink hotel, put together swinging high spot. Don't it always seem to go that we don't know
the street of sand. Big yellow taxi took away my old man. John, it always seems to go that we don't know what we got till it's gone. Oh, they made paradise and put up a parking lot. Well, they made paradise and put up a parking lot. Well, they made paradise and put up a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And I want to apologize, I didn't put up the picture of our chalice when we did the lighting. I want to thank, before we extinguish the chalice, I want to thank James and Valerie for helping with the technical part of the service. I want to thank Jeremy Jacobsen for the music, as well as Joe for that great version of Big Yellow Taxi, and Ruth, and especially to Michael for being with us today. Thank you all very much. Please join me now in extinguishing our chalice. The words are printed on your screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.